Hello, and today we're going to be looking at this idea of critical argument. So the objectives of this session are to provide a definition of critical, to think about what the term means in academic language. Consider the expectations of a standard humanities critical argument. Discuss how best to approach forming a critical argument, and then at the end I'm going to suggest some techniques that might help you form a critical argument. So before we go on to that, let's just quickly look at where argument, this idea of argument, fits within Pick 1. Well, Pick 1 aims to develop a critical approach to ideas and information, and the ability to construct a coherent argument. And you'll be assessed on your ability to construct a critical argument. So this accounts for 25% of your overall grade. But like all the other kind of grade marks here, they all feed into each other. So your critical argument and the quality of your critical argument will depend on the quality of your research, and also depend on how well you put your argument across in academic writing. So all of the grades and the assessment criteria kind of overlap. They're kind of symbiotic, they're dependent on each other. Argument is crucial, because without a central idea or argument, you're going to find it very difficult to score high grades. So let's look at this idea of critical. So when used in an academic context, critical does not mean to criticise, rather it means to critique. So I've got a standard definition here, a definition of critique in English: a detailed analysis and assessment of something, especially a literary, philosophical or political theory. So we'll concentrate on this idea of a detailed analysis and assessment. When you analyse something, you take it apart, you look at how it works, and when you assess it, you see how well it works. So you've got some idea, I hope, of what critique means. So when you're asked to present a critical discussion, which you might be in Pick 1, you may not be looking at a theory particularly, but you'll be looking at a subject, and you'll be taking it apart and really examining it from many, many angles. And you'll be doing that based on evidence and ideas from your research, not simply your own opinion. So in standard academic essays, you will be expected to research and present different perspectives on the topic you are studying, different ways in which that topic could be analysed and assessed. And I'm looking at the definition of argument here, and it's a reason or set of reasons given in support of an idea, action or theory. Now, I'm not going to play this video for you now, but I will link to it, as I have done with the other course as on our course page. I'll link to it on the main course page. So I would suggest you have a quick look at it. It's quite a clear description of what an argument is. And we'll move on, because your critical argument is going to be looking at different perspectives, and it will critique those perspectives. It will assess and analyse those perspectives, and that will be based on your research evidence. So we're all looking back, we're feeding back into our presentation on research here, and how good your research is. Now, the Royal Literary Fund, and I've signposted quite a few of their resources, and that's because they're very high quality resources, and they give the following information. They say ground rules. Let's establish some ground rules based on what we looked at so far. An academic argument, 1, begins with an arguable premise or claim. An undergraduate essays usually ask students to write about a subject that involves exploring different points of view or comparing or contrasting. This will happen. For your second assignment in Pick 1.2, you'll be asked to write an essay, and you'll find that the subject you're given to write about does involve exploring different points of view or comparing or contrasting. It's also worthwhile bearing in mind here that when you move up to Pick 2 at level 5, you'll be given a broader essay title, and you'll have to construct your topic statement, construct your thesis yourself. Now, the Royal Literary Fund goes on to say that an academic argument uses facts and evidence. An academic argument explores an arguable premise or claim using facts, evidence, and different points of view. So when you're given your essay title, you might be asked to compare and contrast something, and then you'll go and research it. And you'll find your research perhaps suggests that you have a claim that you could make in relation to the essay title. And then your argument is going to be justifying that claim. and looking at any evidence that doesn't support that claim. Your argument should be logical and coherent, move from step to step in a clear, developmental manner. And we've already discussed this. If you've seen the video on academic writing, body paragraphs, we talk about this logical argument, and it's why planning is so important. And an academic argument, finally, uses references and credits them. And again, in our referencing presentation, we've looked at why this is important. And these sources, the Royal Literary Fund goes on to say, will be acknowledged in footnotes, a bibliography or a reference list. And these are different ways of referencing. But Hereford College of Art, we ask you for a reference list. Now, if you don't reference, you may be accused of plagiarism, and that has serious consequences. This has been mentioned before, but it's important that I reiterate that, in particular when it comes to inline citation of information you might have paraphrased from external sources. Now, all academic arguments do these things, and there are different ways of doing them. So, further advice from the Royal Literary Fund goes on to say, the majority of subjects you begin with a primary text, and that's the thing you are writing about, talking about. Their examples are a play or a film, but we work in the visual arts, so our texts are going to be the art objects, the artists or the work from artists that you've been asked to discuss in your essay titles. Logical argument. So the Royal Literary Fund goes on to talk about logical argument. The example they give here is an English literature essay might start with a plot summary of the work being discussed, quote from the work or a quote from critical writing on the work. They go on to say the important thing is to use your starting point to say clearly what you are going to write about and why, and to make the rest of your discussion flow naturally from it. And this echoes the advice I've given you when you're writing your introduction. So have a think about what your arts essay might begin with. Key features of a good critical argument will be a balanced discussion, and this is one of the things that distinguishes humanities essays from other sorts of writing. In science, or in social sciences, it's more likely there might be a sort of right or wrong. There might be a kind of black and white way of looking at things. Evidence might lean heavily to suggest one thing. But in the humanities, often an argument has to be evaluated with a nuanced perspective, because the argument itself isn't going to be clear cut. It's going to review various opinions and interpretations, and you will have to look at those and decide which ones you think are most relevant. There is never a kind of clear right or wrong. Ways to support yourself in writing a good critical argument are argument mapping. So here you can see you've got evidence, and the evidence goes together to make a claim. So this is your research evidence here. You can see claim 4 has 3 pieces of evidence to support it. And in the sort of level you're working at, I would expect counter evidence as well, so evidence and counter evidence. But the important thing here is your research drives you to make claims, and the claims will come together and form your main argument. Which claim here do you think might have the most weight? Which claim will give you the sentence for your main argument? Well, possibly claim 4, because it has 3 pieces of evidence, but maybe some of that evidence isn't as important or isn't from such a sort of reliable source as claim 3. So you have to weigh up your evidence as well. It's not simply a matter of how much evidence you can find, but how reliable that evidence is, where it comes from. So have a look at this. Think about how you might use it to support your argument, and your argument will be a response to the essay question. So if you want to have any further resources, the information on the University of Sussex Study Skills pages is useful. Also the Open University, who provide a lot of free study skills courses. And there's 2 more links here which take you to online exercises for argument mapping, and they're well worth looking at if you think that idea of argument mapping would be useful to you. So those will be linked to, those links will be there on the main course page when you go back to it. Thank you very much.